Hey folks, and welcome to the Daily Ratings Podcast. It's a show where each week we sit down with Vincent Daly to get his thoughts on the latest movies he's been watching, both older films and new releases. And don't worry, there's no spoilers. Vince will give a brief review of the movie, share some thoughts, and of course, then rate the film. The daily ratings are always fair, honest, and most importantly, they're consistent. On today's show, Vince will be rating and reviewing The Evil Dead, directed by Sam Raimi, The Evil Dead 2, directed by Sam Raimi, The Blair Witch Project, directed by Daniel Myrick and Eduardo Sanchez, and then we have newly released The Many Saints of Newark by Alan Taylor, and No Time to Die, directed by Cary Joji Fukunaga. So stay tuned and enjoy the show. Mr. Vincent Daly, how we doing, baby?
Tom and boy, how's it going?
It's going okay. It's going all right. I'm excited for this week personally.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think it was a big week, and you have a little bit of still October, some scary, spooky stuff in there, and some big releases as well.
Yeah. I think I've been pleasantly surprised with a lot of the films coming out in theaters. Obviously, there's going to be a lot that we can unpack. Big releases for the year coming out, and mixing that in with the horror, it's been refreshing. I've been really enjoying watching these films week after week. So excited to talk about them, especially one in particular. There's a revisit that I'm ecstatic for.
Okay. Well, let's jump into it right away. We're going to start, of course, with the earliest, as always, The Evil Dead, directed by Sam Raimi.
Okay, so The Evil Dead, this, of course, is the cult classic. I feel like The Evil Dead the film franchise is probably one of those films when you say is a cult classic, has a cult following, is something that you're kind of shown and introduced to a film, that is... And this is the one. Sam Raimi is getting his start with The Evil Dead. Of course, Sam Raimi goes on to direct the Spider-Man movies. Later on in his career, he handles The Evil Dead 2, Army of Darkness, and a few others. I was revisiting these movies because I was not ever a part of a cult following with The Evil Dead. It was something to me that I was aware of these films, to be honest, and maybe even a sneak preview at what a special may be for the podcast is I was looking through the vast amount of different types of horror zombie films and was seeing how The Evil Dead plays into all of this. Basically, the gist of it here is that you have Cabin in the Woods. I believe it's actually in Pennsylvania. It is a Pennsylvania film, I believe.
Fantastic. Okay, yeah.
which is cool. And 4 friends go there, and obviously evil is foreboding in the shadows. I think that is where this film has a highlight, is the feel of the particular malice, the particular type of shadows watching, always being observed by something maybe more powerful. This film does a very good job with creating moments that your characters, our characters in this film, are walking into a really bad situation, and it succeeds at a horror level in that way that they are going to be victim to something.
So they set the stage really well.
Absolutely. At a core of this is great visuals from Sam Raimi. This is his DNA 100%. A lot of people like to, when they're talking about, especially more recent Sam Raimi, Spider-Man 2, there is the horror scene where there is Doc Octopus and his when he's basically becoming the villain, and how hyper stylized the camera work is, the screams, the tracking shots. You can see it all being born here. The type of style that is done in the woods, the type of style of cinematography that is on display, it is 100% Sam Raimi, which was very cool to see.
And was it Sam Raimi with Evil Dead, and it was good to see? It wasn't just his DNA, it was also good to see. For instance, that Spider-Man 2, not exactly is like the hottest film. Or relatively all that good. But
almost cult classic in its own right. There's a lot of reverence for it now after the fact.
yeah, so you saw it, you were like, oh, this is pure Sam Raimi, but also it's like, oh, this is also very good. This is also very good.
For the camera work, absolutely.
Okay.
You read my mind, though, as far as kind of bridging this into maybe some of the more criticism that I have to this film. I was not coming out of this film very hot on it, mainly because in the lineage of this, or in the filmography, you have The Evil Dead, The Evil Dead 2, and then Army of Darkness that come through. This movie gets completely retread by Evil Dead 2, which we'll touch on just a moment, almost beat for beat. Some is good, some is bad to this, but when it comes to this first iteration of Evil Dead, it feels like the visuals, they are at their best in this entire trilogy. Unfortunately, it feels like the characters, the script, Bruce Campbell as really the star of this trilogy, it is at its worst. I'll be honest, the characters or the actors of how they're dealing with the horror on screen. I don't know if it's the script or I don't know if it's definitely supposed to be tongue-in-cheek and campy. It is downright frustrating how idiotic they are on screen. It is rough to see. As far as...
Is it almost like classic bad... Or should I say, when you're watching it, you're just like, oh, are you kidding me? Really? We're going down this road?
It's not so much that... it definitely has a novel plot. I mean, as far as the specifics of the evil being unleashed, the evil that they uncover in this cabin, which is tied to an ancient book, basically, that's going to be the center point of this full trilogy.
Okay. It's like Jumanji.
Yeah, pretty much.
Start playing, yeah.
Or rather, Jumanji maybe sounds like it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, so this is 1981.
Yeah.
But that didn't help it at all.
No, I think actually the practical effects were a standout for me, especially towards the end. They get very creative, and honestly, I'm happy to say it's even though there's a retread of themes almost in every one of these films in this trilogy, Evil Dead 1 does stand apart in, I think, honestly, a lot of the practical effects are at their best. I don't know why that is the case. You'd think that would
wild,
be the inverse
honestly.
way.
It totally would be the inverse way.
Yeah. But unfortunately, the feeling I'm coming out of this, especially as someone that was not necessarily a fan, a follower of the cult following of this movie, I'm really coming out of this very lukewarm. It was not the type of entertainment that I want. This is definitely the most horror of the three movies.
Yeah, which you just categorize as straight classic horror. No, like suspense thriller horror, right? This is just like through and through a horror movie.
Demonic possession, cabin in the woods, uncovering evil, that is what this is about. There is comedy naturally in this film. There is also comedy in the writing, in the script, and what the characters are put into the situations. For instance, the particular type of evil that overcomes our characters. It's very wacky. It's very manic, which you'll see in the later films, they really amp up, and it becomes slowly more of a 50-50 of horror and comedy.
Like a Scream, not Scream, like a scary movie.
Well, maybe not that. It's not doing like any kind of references or anything like that.
Right.
But it is it is definitely a goofball film franchise. It is going more and more for comedy.
Not so much in the first one. It's just there's hints of it.
Yes, there's hints in it, and I think that's once again a reason to possibly visit the first Evil Dead. But the elephant in the room, and anyone that knows this film franchise and has seen Evil Dead 1 and 2 will know, is that Evil Dead 2 is basically a re-roll of the entire first film with better production, more of an understanding of that it's a 50-50 horror comedy, and definitely more of a spotlight on who is our favorite actor in this whole thing, Bruce Campbell, who is great on
I don't know
screen.
how I feel about that, though, overall. Well, I guess we'll find out how you feel about it.
I think there's definitely value in the film understanding what it is rather than being confused.
Okay.
And believe me, I will give it some slack in the sense that this is Sam Raimi's first film. I mean, we can
first film, 81. I want to make a point too here. It's 1981. It's only an hour and 25 minutes long, and this got an NC-17 rating.
Yes, the only one with the NC-17.
Yeah,
too.
so I mean, it's just like he has a lot. if you just look at the stats kind of this film or look at the 10,000 foot view, it's almost like, how could this be good?
Right.
Well, you're picturing low budget, you're picturing extreme gore, something like that, something that's not meant for wide audiences and everything like that. But I'm assuming that the hour and 25 minutes helps it. Well, I mean, do you feel that way? I mean,
definitely more snappy. Again, I mean, if there's anything that I'm hyper focused on is just how idiotic these characters are on screen, and not in a good way. It took me out of the. It took me out of it. We'll definitely revisit some of the movies as far as horror-wise that I'm touching on that thankfully have very competent characters at the helm, and how enjoyable it is to watch a horror protagonist effectively go through a story. This is not the movie for that.
Yeah. It's very interesting you said that you do want to see competent characters because it brings... I don't want to say it brings a realism. I mean, we're watching, it's a horror film, but it does bring a sort of realism that you can relatableness to it, kind of. When you just have like goofy, and it's totally unrealistic, unrelatable, you get that sense that you're out of the film or something like that.
Exactly, and later on in the franchise, this film understands that it's not trying to be realistic. It's going for much more of a self-aware type of comedy horror built into it, and it does work better. But I think for this entry, it kind of falls into a weird first iteration, and I think as well, if we're going to go to the cult following of this, I think anyone that is a fan of this franchise will say Evil Dead 2 is really where it's at as far as all of those. But overall, I think it's a little bit of a pass for me. Didn't really live up to the hype, especially for what the sequel does, and really almost recaps the entire film, leaving a very soft recommendation that if you're in love with Raimi as a director, if you're in love with horror camp as kind of a very subgenre, or horror comedy as a genre, I think that's definitely something that you gotta have to be self-aware of your own biases and what you want to come to a movie with, or what you're looking in a film, rather. For me, though, The Evil Dead was not something that I think was worth a huge following, and definitely not worth your time, more than a morbid curiosity to see maybe some of the roots of Raimi's directing style, and obviously the start of this trilogy.
Yeah.
We will go ahead and give The Evil Dead a 43.
Oh, okay, 43. Okay, that makes sense how you were talking about it.
Yeah, I think it doesn't go too much lower because there's a lot. There are some standout aspects, but overall, moving on to the second one. You can pass on
it. Like you said, really, if you're only interested in the roots of this franchise and everything and how they get to 2, you would be interested to check it out. But
I can't stress enough, I mean, and this can be kind of our bridge into The Evil Dead 2. I mean, it is a complete re-roll. The first...
I think we should just jump right into it then.
Sure.
Because were you excited to see... What did you realize... Did you know going into it you're going to be watching the same film, but just kind of redone a little bit?
I think I had some awareness of... the thought process among fans is, hey, don't bother with Evil Dead 1, just go to Evil Dead 2.
So that's in the air.
And I can definitely reiterate that for our audience. The Evil Dead 2, almost in the first 10 minutes, recaps everything in Evil Dead 1 and keeps it moving along at a very brisk pace.
Okay, brisk pace, like I said, first one, hour and 25. Evil Dead 2, hour and 24. We now have...
Trimming it.
Yeah, we're 6 years later, it's 87, it's rated R now. And so it's like, hey, let's just give this another attempt. Is that kind of what it was?
I don't know too much of the production story, unfortunately, but I think if you're a fan of, especially the type of low-budget, independent film production that Raimi was doing with Evil Dead 1, I think especially if you're a fan of Evil Dead 2, that's maybe something to dive into, because I do think there's something to uncover there of why he was able to create this film franchise, and more importantly, why he kept on revisiting it, despite what was it, a 7-year gap?
6-year gap, yeah.
6-year gap. So... clearly, this was his baby.
It's a little strange,
and I think that's something fun to maybe research into it. I did not, though, going into this.
Well, that's kind of how we like it, actually.
Yeah,
it's like let's just give us the film. I mean,
And I definitely didn't want any fat to my criticism with it because, again, this does have a cult following. I think there's a lot of, kind of blinders on people that have maybe nostalgic for this.
Recently sized, like, a relatively successful video game franchise off of it, too?
I don't know about video game. They have Ash versus the Evil Dead, which is a TV spinoff.
Maybe it's just Evil. There's a lot of Evil Deads that come up.
Oh, I think you're thinking of the Evil Within.
Maybe that, but also maybe I could be thinking of other films too.
Yeah.
that have Evil Dead. There's a lot.
Right, or the evil, basically.
Right, exactly. But it's interesting. So it's like, is it just a 1-to-1 copy?
Basically,
with upgrades.
Right. Basically, it's a re-roll of the same plot while also
literally
recapping.
To the point where you have like a group of kids or vacationers in a cabin.
Let me explain it this way. In the first 10 minutes, it recaps all of the events of Evil Dead 1, but then the plot itself is as well kind of a parallel to the Evil Dead 1 as well.
Okay.
You have new characters, you have progression in Bruce Campbell's character, but in itself, if you had to compare it from a Spark Notes, you'd say, oh, this is just the same movie. And that basically is it. That's why it is a
Is it almost like Star Wars, where it's like, we
little
destroyed the
bit,
Death
yeah.
Star. It's just like, oh, no, this is...
Here it is again.
Here's another Death Star.
Absolutely.
It's a little bit different,
I
but
think
it's like
that's
the
a great
same.
example.
Okay.
Yeah. But in that itself, a summary of this film, very similarly, it is, the same evil that, the characters are dealing with, the same book that they uncover, the same cabin. For that reason, a very similar plot progression of them slowly being confined, put into the grasp of the evil around them, the demons, and the type of possession type, not zombie horror, but definitely Living Dead type horror. This movie 100% understands much more what it's going for. It is... my note here is stupid, but not stupid. So it's
okay.
It's a little bit more comfortable with being stupid in its comedy, stupid in the action or even the gore sometimes, but it's not stupid in the frustrating characters that I talked about in the first one, where
right.
it was taking me out, where something would be happening in the room and then the camera goes to the character and they're just still reacting to it. It's like, do something, that
right.
really took me out of any kind of immersion with this film.
Yeah,
or
so
the first
this
film.
comedy mix, this film knows what it is doing.
Yes.
Like, it knows that it's silly.
Mm-hmm.
And you're saying this is silly right now, but it's like, oh, they know what's going on. They know exactly what they're doing, and it keeps you in it at least.
Yeah. I think there's a refinement to the product for that reason.
Okay.
If I don't know the whole production history of this, but if I had to think, why would a director want to revisit something and take another stab at it? This is a perfect example of them coming out of that interaction with a success or with a win, because it's a better product in the end, where maybe flashing back to Escape from New York to Escape from LA.
Oh my goodness.
Why are we revisiting this when it's the same result? That would be a failure. This would be kind of a win in that revisit of the concept.
It makes sense where you were like, it's pretty much his baby.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Sam Raimi's baby. And it's like, that's cool that he kept elements that work throughout the first one. And he was like, no, let's just improve upon this and hit focus on what we're good at and go for it. That's very cool.
Yeah, in the re-roll, and again, I mean, it's not that much of a film, but certainly want to stay away from heavy spoilers. Probably the best part about that re-roll is a amplification, a magnification of the iconic moments, especially around Bruce Campbell. Bruce Campbell is center stage here. He is undeniably the best part about these films, and undeniably the funniest part if we're going to really boil down the comedic element to it.
He totally takes it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think where I fall off, and I've even mentioned this before in previous podcasts, it's a little difficult to criticize comedy because it is so subjective and so tainted to the passage of time. How does a joke hold up? And I think I'm a strong believer in that we're watching movies in the here and now. There's no sense in really watching a movie or trying to place yourself in the seats of back then. There's no sense.
It's really impossible.
Exactly.
Really impossible.
And comedy, unfortunately, kind of suffers in that viewpoint. The good thing about this is that Campbell holds up. He is so entertaining to watch on screen.
That's when you know something's really quite good then.
Absolutely.
Because you can say that with almost any genre, really type of thing, as far as does it hold up in the test of time and everything like that. those you have you look at Blazing Saddles or something like that. There
Sure.
are things that hold up, and that's when you know you have a keeper, a winner.
Absolutely.
You know?
Yeah. And maybe that's just the mark of what is going to rise above the rest. The cream that rises to the top of if something can
Sure.
stand the test of time,
Yeah.
especially with comedy. I think just sticking on the comedy, and especially with a mix of horror a little bit, unfortunately, where the comedy fails for me is when the horror and comedy are one and the same. When the evil in The Evil Dead is delivering these comedic beats, that's where it kind of fails for me. Not to give an example to another movie, but overall, if the conflict of the movie, if the menacing aspects of a horror movie are not taken as seriously, it kind of just meanders a little bit. It's the stakes aren't there. Still add in your comedic beats, but I think once again the goofiness when it touches on what the conflict is in this movie, around the cabin, the type of evil, the type of possession that happens. Once again, it kind of
kills it.
That's where it falls short.
You want them to be way more. You want them to be kept separate.
Absolutely.
Your comedy is good, but give me comedy there, and then give me horror here, and give me pure horror.
Absolutely.
You want that roller coaster ride.
100%, especially because
ebbs and
Bruce
flows.
can hold the candle to the comedic side on its own, and we actually see that in Army of Darkness later on, which we'll of course touch upon probably next podcast. But overall, I mean, the near identical story. I'm happy to say that there's much more to love here, and I think Evil Dead 2. Much more deserved of the cult classic title. And I'm really happy to say that because I think you talk to anyone that is a fan of this franchise, they say Evil Dead 2, that's where it's at. That's where the vibe is. Understanding that, watching this movie, there was certainly enjoyment. I have to come at it fairly critical, though, because do I find this something that rises above a cult status and is something that is a must-watch, is something that you have to make time for? I don't think so. There's a lot of stuff that works here. And once again, interesting to watch the habits of Sam Raimi as a director in the camera work, in how scenes are presented, in the manic chaos of how the horror is introduced. It's entertaining, but I don't think it's anything that's I would say, oh, before you die, you got to watch Evil Dead 2. And I don't mean to be a bummer to this because it is ultimately a very goofy movie. But I think with such a cult classic title to it, if not one of the kind of titles to that type of category, it left me a little disappointed with it for that reason. Bottom line, that is where I'm coming at this with my recommendation. With that in mind, we will go ahead and give The Evil Dead 2 a 54.
Oh, wow. Much lower than I thought, to be honest with you.
Oh, really?
Well, yeah, because when you're saying, this isn't a must-watch, before you die, you shouldn't see it, that'd be, okay, well, it's not in the 80s, that's fine.
Right.
But it's like, maybe you should watch in the 70s, or at least, pretty good film. I was expecting 60s. I was expecting high 60s. But 54, okay, that's really not that much more impressive, or much more of an improvement.
Right. And honestly, I would challenge a lot of our viewing audience, maybe even the fans of this franchise, watch both back-to-back. Yeah, there's an evolution
I'm actually shocked that was 54.
You sure?
I was almost positive you were going to be high 60s.
Oh, really? Mm-hmm. Okay.
And I'm wondering, so let's say you're overall a horror fan. You love the genre of horror. You love, October comes around. It's what gets you excited. Mm-hmm. That and pumpkin beer,
Right.
So
pumpkin spice latte.
Right. And it's the question, would you even put this on the category of, you're an October, horror fan?
Maybe if you want to really... The thing is...
It's not even that important.
Yeah, I mean... Well, we'll talk in actually probably just a second about a horror movie I'm ecstatic about.
Okay, good.
But I don't know. I think if you want popcorn with the boys, watch a comedy film kind of thing, but spooky themes, that's Evil Dead franchise.
Throw it on. But as far as
that's the elevator pitch.
As far as horror franchise goes, as far as classic scary or those kind of spooky aimed movies. Wow, even that. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, the 54
and that's
is
me
right where
being
it should
real
be.
with it.
No, of course, absolutely.
Yeah.
Wow, wonderful. Yeah. And again, like you said, if people want to write into us and kind of give their perspective or
right.
There's
a lot of love for that film. So.
Like you said, cult following.
Yes.
They're not going to be happy about it, but whatever. They can make their own podcast. That's the whole point. It sounds like the next one we're going to have some better numbers on. Let's go with that The Blair Witch Project,
Oh,
which
man.
it's a name that pretty much everybody knows.
Isn't it? I am so excited to talk about this movie.
Oh, fantastic.
The Blair Witch Project, obviously the early internet phenomenon, the early, I guess you would call it pre-Web 2.0.
Very interesting. It is kind of like groundbreaking is kind of a big word. But
I think that's fair.
trendsetter. Let's just trendsetter.
Certainly, and you can say trendsetter for sure with what it spawned as far as the found footage genre in film. I am so happy to say that, and I feel like there's not many things, especially in looking at film as a creative medium, that you can say, first one's the best. You know, that's the pinnacle there. And I think, especially with the lows,
you think that's rare?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah. Because I think I on the shoulder of giants, everything can be, improvised on and refined,
tweaked and everything.
Exactly. There's obviously the passage of time that kind of creates a more modern take on certain things. And when it comes to found footage as a genre, man, are those some bad movies. You look at Paranormal Activity. You look at
Super 8?
Yeah, a little bit.
Of that footage style, kind of?
Yeah. But either way, found footage as a film category are really bad films in there. Really gimmicky, not at all anything that I would classify as in the masterpiece category or in a must-watch. So it makes me so happy to revisit a film like this, not only experience what I love in revisiting films, to see the trends start, to see the habits or the styling start.
And when was the last time you would say you watched this? What was the gap?
Good question. Maybe like a 2006 or something.
Okay,
like that.
so you're really looking at this at fresh eyes a little bit then, too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's awesome.
And I think what is so refreshing about it is that my watching it today. I mean, we just talked about it. Watching in present day. There's no point in going back in a time capsule and trying to experiencing this. And probably no better example is this film, because this film was in a bubble of how it was experienced, whether it was real or not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Obviously all fake, but that's okay. I think if anything, it's a shame to try to look at this film and constantly question in your head, is it real, is it not? It distracts what the film is about, and the movie is about madness. The movie is... Obviously, if you're completely in the dark for the Blair Witch Project, this is following a group of filmmakers, student filmmakers, trying to make a very real, very documentary-style approach to what is a local legend of the Blair Witch. Early on in the film, there is a lot of conflicting information presented for the audience of what the town people think is the Blair Witch, what are stories that happen throughout the town as a result of this madness. And we follow that in the process of them trying to make the film. So the film is found footage about making a film. And man, it is such a great movie about going crazy in the woods. And I think the key to that is that it's presented in this found footage style that any audience member can very much place themselves in the archetype of these three characters on screen and how they would react to that situation, and almost go through, the 7 stages of grief with these characters, which is so awesome to see on film. I thought it was...
feel, because it sounds relatable. It's if they're that relatable to it, that means it sounds like the acting for these kids are pretty good.
Yes, I think the acting is definitely a highlight because it is very off the cuff. I think there's even some awkwardness to some dialogue, but it's the realness.
It's like
to
genuine.
It. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Very cool.
And I think it creates a very realistic unraveling. If I had to pinpoint why this works for the genre of horror, is because center stage, you have no editing that is going to be going to be a huge time jump for these characters. There's never a point that we are not checking in with our characters after a few, beyond just a few hours. So there is a very realistic unraveling to that. In basically, again, going mad in the woods and trying to, find something spooky. Find this story within what they're trying to film as a documentary within the story of Blair Witch, and then really just uncovering the madness that it is of getting lost in the woods. And man, it was just so refreshing to watch in that way, specifically aside from anything like, oh, is this real? Was this a real story? Is this snuff or anything like that? Which honestly consumed the type of criticism this film had when it released in 2001. Time. Yeah. It was 2001, right?
Yep. Yeah, okay. No, 99.
Oh, 99.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wow. Look at that.
And can I just say, it's an hour and 21 minutes long. It's perfect. I love that. Yes. I love that.
Absolutely. And it's been such a sticking point for me as of late.
Well, yeah, we've been talking about time a lot, but just the fact, especially when we're in the horror genre, give me snappy.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
We all know what we're here for, kind of deal. So it's like, let's not drag this out.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
The acting, the editing, the relationships, it keeps a continuity that I think once again is a key to why this movie raises above in a horror in the horror genre, especially with the acting. Like I said, there's parts that are maybe a little embarrassing, a little cringy, certainly a bit annoying in some of the actual delivery of it. But again, there is a investment that happens when you're watching this, and you can very much put yourself in the shoes of one of the characters or just a fourth, observer along on this camping trip and along this, documentary film project. But that's what really takes it above. More than anything, let's touch on the editing a little bit. The editing is being presented. What we're seeing is being presented from a kind of behind-the-scenes content that the filmmaker character is recording in the process of the film. What this does is it creates gaps in time. There's a little bit of a disconnect because I think classic problem with found footage is, why is this character still filming? Why are we, if it's truly like a crazy scenario, why are we actually keeping the camera on?
Right.
And there's a through line to that, in this madness, she's holding on to the one piece of what she has as her identity, and she's a filmmaker, so she's keeping the camera on, even though she's, everyone's going crazy with this.
These drips of realism
Absolutely.
that keep you engaged in it, which is great. It's
Absolutely.
Just refreshing, honestly.
Yeah. With the editing presented in this way, we have cuts and gaps in time, never too long, like I said just a little bit ago, but it hits on what I can safely say, especially after watching as many horror movies as I have been, it hits on the key point. Less info means more horror.
Yeah.
That is the keystone there. You see this in everything from gaps in the edit, which are presented obviously in, the characters turning off the cameras and then revisiting them during a time of tension or anything like that, but also in the most brilliant moments of when the screen is entirely black. There is a transfixing that happens, that you're just listening to the audio, you're watching the black screen. And, maybe, especially for when this film came out, you could take a look at that and say, well, what is all this hype about? What I'm just watching a black screen. This isn't scary. Once again, the immersion that happens throughout this film, that those black screens, that total blackness that happens in some of these shots, brilliant.
Some of the most important parts of the film.
Absolutely. And again, just ties very simply into what I think probably is one of the top, the main cornerstones of what horror should be about is less information, let the imagination run wild. The imagination can't run any more wild than a black screen and just listening to audio and imagining what could be there.
It's fantastic.
Absolutely.
And then when it's well done, because if it's not well done, that's it. You have a black screen and you're just tuned out completely.
Sure.
What I mean? It could be done. This could have been a horrible film, really.
Right.
Quite easily, but when done tastefully and done properly, it's the most engaged you can be in a film is in those moments. So
Absolutely.
it's fantastic that they do it right.
Absolutely. And bottom line, I think for that reason, the legacy of this film is really background noise. When it comes to what we're looking at and while an audience today might be watching this film, sure, there could be an awareness of, wow, this was that crazy sensation. People thought it was real. It was this guerrilla marketing that was being passed around on college campuses and whatnot. All of that is background noise, and honestly, to consider that in watching the film today is a total distraction about what the film is about. It's not about whether it was real or fake. It's not about the type of impact it was, or if it led up to, or if it lived up to the expectations of audiences at that time. I think it is a film that you need to understand has a very specific vision of placing you front and center in what it's like to have a project in the woods and go mad in the woods. And I think it just succeeds so impressively well at that.
Oh, very good.
I almost feel bad because for original audiences, there's some distraction there. And I think maybe this film didn't get as much praise back then because it was distracted by that factor. But
sure.
That is why I make such a bullet point about it to the audience and folks at home, making sure that you come into this and seeing it like any other horror movie and really getting immersed in the horror that is displayed on screen. Really, nothing else like it, and absolutely a must-watch. We are going to go ahead and give The Blair Witch Project an 82.
Yeah, very nice.
I was very pleased. It was on my list too. I didn't know where it was going to land.
You knew you were going to like it, right?
I think so, but I think when I saw it, obviously as more of a kid. I was probably enveloped in like, oh, this is that movie that people think is real and obviously is not real, So,
Sure, yeah.
That's
great. That's really great to hear. I always love. I knew it was certain you're going to get a decent score or something like that. But again, I'm surprised again that it cracked the 80s.
Very pleased with it.
Just to remind people too, again, like when you're in the 80s, those are like must-watch films, kind of.
100%.
As soon as you crack the 80s for us, that's a bit of. That number means a lot to us, basically.
Something that you should make time for.
Absolutely. 70s are should watch, 80s are kind of must watch. Once we get in the 90s, that's when you're into best films ever created of all time.
Yeah. And I'm happy that, this and The Host recently as well. Horror could crack that because I feel like horror.
It's so great.
Yeah.
Well, there's so much made, too.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't realize
a lot of bad.
It's a lot of bad, exactly. Very, very good. 82% for the Blair Witch Project. Awesome. Awesome. Very cool. All right, well, let's move on. Take a break here and just quick do the producer segment and to remind everybody, Vin and I were operating off the value for value model here. So no corporate sponsors, no advertising, things like that. We're operating from you, the producers. Vin and I, we host the show. We come on. I turn on the mics, and then Vin does his thing.
You cut yourself some credit.
And basically, you all actually help produce the show. You're what kind of helps keep it going. If you want to be a legit producer, and basically we do monetary donations, and you can go to our site, thedailyratings.com. You can go to the donations tab, and whatever amount of value you feel you received from the product, whatever you get from our website, do you find yourself checking it over maybe Rotten Tomatoes? Because Rotten Tomatoes is worse, and you're just like, oh, I'm checking out those guys a little bit more. If you could throw us a couple bucks or, a fun donation. We have some monthly subscriptions or something like that if you want to. We really, really appreciate it. We're kind of building a little family here. And again, the value for value model, it keeps us close to you. Let us know. If we're not getting much from you guys, we know that the product that we're giving isn't up to snuff. It's not good enough, and that's going to keep us on our heels and make us change to make the best product possible. We want to do the best for you. We enjoy doing this, and so that kind of helps us with feedback and everything like that. So if you're enjoying this, enjoy the website, please. dailyratings.com, donations tab, and whatever value you feel you received from us. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Let's keep it moving. We're going to do the movies that are now in theaters or recently released online, something like that. But we're going to start with The Many Saints of Newark.
Yes. Okay. So this one, of course, the Sopranos story. I feel like coming into this, understand that much like any movie that would come off of the heels of a show, I think probably most recent example would be the Breaking Bad movie, which I think is a good comparison. Certainly similar high caliber quality to both of those series. Considered some of the best of the best as far as television goes.
Absolutely.
I think it's important to note that, hey, if you dig The Sopranos, you're probably going to watch this film, and I think that kind of transcends a rating system in a way, because there is a morbid curiosity, regardless of what I'll say, to see the Easter eggs for yourself, experience the callbacks for yourself, especially for the massive amount of gap in time that has happened between the show The Sopranos and now this new Sopranos story, which I guess they're planning to do more movies as well.
So not shows or anything like that. Stick it to
more. And maybe it'll
film.
be mini. Who knows?
Sure.
What's in the plans.
Yeah, there was a lot riding on this. I don't want to say there was a lot riding on it, but it was definitely, you have Gandolfini's son is in it. Ray Liotta is in there. You have like a big cast. You have some old school guys coming back from The Sopranos.
Callbacks, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. How did
it all come out?
Yeah, exactly. When all was said and done, how did that all culminate? Because it was getting, I wouldn't say hype, a buzz, for sure.
And I think it is deserved of some. I think there's a lot of creative stuff done with the callbacks to the show The Sopranos, but I think it's important to note for folks at home how I am going about this as a review is, does this succeed as a story, as a movie, apart from the show? And I think that is critical, because the movie, if they're going to make a movie, it's got to stand on its own 2 feet. Apart from all the Easter eggs, apart from all that.
Absolutely.
Because it is not sequentially the same. It's a prequel.
Right.
So it needs to succeed on its own.
Yes, I think like the subtitle is like, "Who made Tony Soprano?"
You're right.
So we know what we're dealing with here. Yeah.
You're right. There's a lot of characters, obviously, from Tony's life, but it's very interested in telling its own story around one specific character of Tony's guidance, Dicky Moltisanti, and what is kind of setting the stage for when we finally get into the show. Easter eggs are absolutely around, oh wow, look how young that character is, and event callbacks that characters in The Sopranos will mention as stories, whether that's related to trauma or anything like that. Obviously there's a very psychological spin to The Sopranos. When it comes to that, there's really nothing that happens that is critical to the story that is connected to these Easter eggs. And I think it's so funny that you say that this is whatever the tagline is, the start of Tony Soprano. I mean, Tony takes a back seat, and Gandolfini's son is doing a fine job acting.
Okay.
I think I enjoy him on screen. I enjoy him trying to play his father's character as well, a younger version. I think he succeeds in that, most importantly. But what is a disarray is that we have these moments where they're trying to add in these callbacks to the show, or even if it's just kind of a visual Easter egg, none of it, I think, relates to a very muddling, middle-of-the-road mob story. And that was the biggest disappointing part for me, and definitely plays into, again, how I kind of preface this whole review. Is this succeeding on its own? Does that make sense?
No, of course. And it's funny that when you said that kind of like middle-of-the-road mob movie, I'm wondering, is the market being so saturated, and you have those, just the pillars of the Goodfellas and the Godfathers, and it's just like, I just feel like everything's chasing that a little bit, and are we over... Is it overdone? Are these plots kind of overdone? And it's just like, another... It's just becoming saturated to the point where that's another mob movie.
Absolutely, and I think this very plainly falls in that category.
It's not an easy feat to be a standout at this point.
Sure.
It's not.
It's either do something new or copy Goodfellas, and this definitely is in the copy Goodfellas category.
Yeah, and it never can reach that good. I mean, you take Scorsese himself.
Sure.
Like Casino, very good movie, still not hitting it.
Right.
And then you have... oh my gosh, I can't remember it now. One that just came out on Netflix.
Irishman.
Right, you have The Irishman that just came out, and again, it's just like, oh, okay, all right, he did another one.
I know, yeah.
And it's tough. But when you have the name of The Sopranos coming behind you, and some of the creators and writers and everything like that, it's like there is a bit of an expectation there,
right?
Of that, not wow factor, but like we're gonna get something good here, and maybe dropped off a little bit.
I do got to give credit. I mean, you bring up a great point. I mean, there is care put into this. Not only are a lot of the characters and a lot of the Easter eggs, I would consider pretty good deep cuts into the show.
Okay.
But I really do love that the director was in the talent of producing the show as well.
Yeah.
I believe he did, I don't know, maybe double-digit episodes as far as directing and behind the scenes, which is good to see. A good trend and a good indicator going into this film that let me have some hype to it, but again, fall short.
So that middle of the road thing. So it sounds like the acting was quite good. It sounds like there was care put into it. So was it the writing that suffered? Was it the overall feel or setup of the film? Like what was it that brought it down? It seems like you have all the makings of something very special.
Right. A couple things. I think the plot is pretty distracted, and there's the conflict as well in the plot is. It just comes out middle of the road.
Okay.
There's good Jersey roots here. Including some historical events. There is. I don't want to go into spoilers too much because it does relate to the B plot in this film, but there's some good callbacks that I thought was kind of interesting. Not in a way to say like, oh wow, can you guess what time period we're in? It's more so. There's a good craft to the feel of this film that, for a moment, escapes the stereotypical 50s, early 60s mob feel. And I was so hoping something was done with it. But once again, it plays into a B plot that not only doesn't take from that too much, but very much distracts from what we're supposed to be caring about, which oddly enough, is not Tony. Tony is probably third on the totem pole.
Wow.
Which is, again, I kind of find insane if the sole point of this movie is to focus on Tony and Gandolfini's son as far as, possibly even setting up future shows and whatnot.
Yeah, well, I think the big thing is if this is kind of like, the Many Saints of Newark, a Soprano story, you could kind of dub it. People loved Tony. You know what I mean? It's just what The Sopranos was. So you would think they would want to bring him into the limelight a little bit, as much as possible, with him not actually being in it or something like that. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Our main character being Dickie Moltisanti, he has a very interesting arc, but again, the conflict is what is wrong here. And I think part of the delivery in that conflict is that if I had to define what makes a mob movie is the rule of cool. You gotta have your characters so cool as ice, to the point that you want to be them on screen. I mean, it really comes down to the opening.
They have a
Goodfellas.
swagger about them.
Absolutely.
For sure. Yeah, of course.
It really is pinpointed in Goodfellas that you want to be them on screen. So that's where it relates to it. The rule of cool is not here. Honestly, I don't think any of the characters are cool on screen. I don't find they are given moments that there is that glamour to the mafia. It's a shame, because I think that's where, when I say this is a run-of-the-mill mob movie, that's where it dies. That's where it lives and dies, is that it fails to create this fascination.
How was young Tony? Like, how was Michael Gandolfini? Was he cool?
Great.
Was he did suave character?
Not necessarily. He's supposed to be really young in the film.
Okay, all right.
Definitely coming up. I like his performance quite a bit. The problem is he's maybe given 20 minutes on screen of the entire runtime. I mean, that's definitely rough ballpark, but instead we have a focus on the Easter egg hunt, the main plot with Dickie, a B plot that is the conflict of the film that goes nowhere, and let me tell you, Ray Liotta, the worst part about the film.
You never know what you're gonna get with Ray Liotta. Could be the best. Like him in Blow is so
right.
It's so good.
Right.
You enjoy, like, when he's on screen, you're watching, and some of the most you're engaged. It's so off and on with that guy. What is it?
It's rough. And I would say mostly off for recent history as well. There hasn't really been a really good hit that I can think of.
Oh, I think I think there is one where he's quite good. Oh gosh, I'm gonna have to go back and think.
Listen, I'm rooting for him too.
Oh, I think everybody.
I think everyone is. Everyone's on the same page. They want him to do good.
I'll say right now, best part of Wild Hogs.
Isn't he the antagonist in that?
Yeah. And he's phenomenal. He crushes it. But it's just like
Amazing.
I love Ray Liotta so I love him.
Yeah.
I love him on screen, but it's unbelievable how hit and miss it. Maybe he's just difficult to write for.
Maybe
It's just what I mean.
know. It just boils down to the same yelly, Karen.
Okay,
You flushed it. I don't know. That's like every delivery in these movies.
Oh, what a bummer to hear.
It really is. Something to note: he actually plays two characters in the same movie, which was not only visually confusing but really odd because one character is very stereotypical mob, and the other character is a Buddhist and listens to free jazz, and I don't know why it's in there. There's a weird consciousness to some of the not consciousness. There's a weird morality teaching to some of the characters. Once again, like many themes in this movie, it's put out there. It goes nowhere.
Were there any other actors that got double roles?
No, that's the only.
So this
one.
was not like a Cloud Atlas thing.
No, definitely not. Didn't we mention Cloud Atlas recently as well?
I don't know if we did or not. I don't know.
Well,
It hasn't been in my head all that much recently.
That's amazing.
Why he really owed it two roles?
I don't know. It's weird. But yeah, I think that's
Which one was better, by the way? Which Ray was better?
the second one is just such a out of left field. It's almost like he's trying to be a contrarian to the mob. Like he's like, no, I don't listen to Frank and the Rat Pack. Give me free jazz every day. It's just like, what is this? Oh boy. But a lot of these aspects aside, I really cannot break away from the simple fact that if you're a Sopranos fan, this is probably going to be a watch list regardless, as it was for me.
Yeah.
That's the truth of it.
Everything that comes out of the Sopranos world, you're going to want to see.
Exactly.
Basically, yeah.
And possibly this has some promise, again, for Michael Gandolfini, James's son, in the role of Tony. I think this could be good. I mean, who knows? We might be dealing with the Sopranos cinematic universe, SCU or something. But who knows? I think, but for that reason, like I really introduced this whole section, almost identical to that Breaking Bad film, which, again, almost I don't know what previously was ranked. We did watch that, but it's something that just falls into middle of the road, but difficult for what we do here on the ratings, because it's almost required viewing in a way. But man, did this movie not stand on its own. I think that's where I have to stay true to what my goal is going into this film. Does it stand on its own 2 feet? Yes, but it does so in the most middle of the crowd, mediocre way, total not pass, and sad to see a mob movie could not rise above worse than Goodfellas. We'll go ahead and give The Many Saints of Newark a 49.
You're not even going to let it crack the 50.
Oh no, yeah, that was me being spiteful.
Okay, yeah, I mean, from what's been, that's what it seems like.
Right.
Such a shame. Mm-hmm. Here's my thing. Let's say you haven't watched The Sopranos yet, but you're going to, and you know how good it,
sure, and maybe even understand this is a prequel.
So my question is, you're about to watch Sopranos. You know you're gonna like it, so that means you're probably gonna watch the movie as well because it's just more content. Would you recommend watching the movie first?
I think some people will do that because it is a prequel. So hey, maybe I'll watch this
would that
first.
be nice, or would it be interesting? Because
I think
you'll be seeing the Easter eggs from the film now in the show.
Maybe it'd be hard to say.
It'd be nice that you're going
up. I would say
it's like you start with the worst one and just get go with the better, which is the TV series.
Right, yeah. Actually, there is a build. I think that's a good point. I don't know. It'd be hard to say. I think mostly you lose the little enjoyment that the Easter egg hunt has in these movies. Oh, look how young they are.
And the biggest thing is it's so Tony centric in the show that if you're saying 20 minutes or a quarter of the film is really we're getting Tony as well. Maybe it's it was just in the back of my head though.
Yeah.
What would you want to start with, actually?
Yeah.
All right, 49%, not very good.
Yeah,
Shame.
middle
It's
of
a
the
shame.
road. Middle of the road, trending bad.
Yes. Okay. So this one, very excited for, very important to me. The
pressure's on.
We talk about the Bond series often. We throw stuff
do.
in here. Anything
Yeah.
spy related, usually there's going to be some sort of nod there or
Absolutely.
something like that. Means a lot to me. The Bond franchise, big time.
Mm-hmm.
No Time to Die. Fifth and final film from Daniel Craig, putting a bow, putting the other end of the bookend on things. No Time to Die, man. What do we have?
All right. So No Time to Die, very... I think it's very important to note that almost in no other time in the Bond franchise do we have a film that you need to watch some homework for. I think you do need to see some of the other films in the Daniel Craig series to keep up with some of the beats, where a lot of characters are coming from, but most importantly, the theme that is core to this film. The theme here is one of the better parts of what I think No Time to Die does well, and it is the theme of distrust. It is this double cross. Bond cannot trust anyone, and really, we haven't revisited, especially because that will be something we tackle eventually. All of the Bond films.
Oh, Bond special for sure.
Or at least Craig's Bond films.
Oh yeah, we'll take it. We'll take it through the actors.
Yeah, that's a lot of films.
Hopefully, we do this for a little while.
Right,
it's up to the producers. They'll decide.
But I think if there's any theme throughout these films to create a through line through all five, even some of the lesser ones, is that Bond has this conflict of he cannot trust anyone. He's bound to be a rogue, a loner. Some films that is tied into he cannot trust his organization of MI6. I think this one ties in best because it is about what is closest to Bond, and it's just his relationships then.
Yeah, it's the biggest through line through Craig's. Well, first of all, Craig's stint as Bond, they don't connect movies at all like this with any other ones.
They
keep it through,
yeah.
and that trust thing is just the biggest through line through every single film. Starting with Vesper, going through that, even Judi Dench's M, even her giving things of, I feel like I have to know that I can trust you, Bond. Bond says I don't trust anybody, and she's like, oh, good, you learned something. I mean, this is such a through line of trust.
Yeah, and I think that's really one of many highlights in this film. I think that's one of the larger ones I put credit into because, again, if we are going to go against the grain and create a James Bond film that is very plainly a sequel, a progression of the character versus just a new re-roll of situation and circumstance, then I think that's worthwhile. You have to kind of follow through on the arc of where this character is going. And I think distrust being related in a spy film is wonderful to unpack with that and see how this character maybe not overcomes that, but is punished by it and is put into circumstances and driven by it.
Yeah, how does he get out of it? It's a lot like, I don't know, it's honestly putting a mouse in a maze and seeing what he can do with it.
Absolutely. I would say, as far as Bond aside and Craig's performance aside, some of the themes around the characters seem to be a little bit of a retread. I think it hurts characters like M. He seems to have the same exact arc as Inspector. A little bit of a distrust of organization. There also seems to be a good amount of baggage from Spectre. I think MI6 as a whole kind of goes through a similar arc from my memory of that film. I think when it relates to the factors around Bond, I think, again, no spoilers, the very premise of this film coming off of Spectre is that Bond has stepped away from the 007 role. The beauty of that is that we are separated from... Or I would say we have kind of a healthy distance. The spotlight is center on Daniel Craig, and I really do think that's where the film is at its best. When we introduce side characters, when we introduce a lot of the other supporting cast, it's not that they're bad. It's just that I want the camera back on Craig.
He is magnetic.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's great to see him on screen and great to see once again that right there plays into what I said just a moment ago again of if it's going to be an arc for a character that maybe specifically is arcless by design of these films. I think it's wonderful to see that they're building on that, and he gives such a good performance. Similar to Skyfall, wow, is this a gorgeous film. We talked, actually, you introduced it perfectly, that when we've talked about spy movies or espionage type movies, we always talk about the jet set. We always talk about the scene hopping. I think this movie, definitely at the same caliber of Skyfall, which I think had wonderful cinematography and set or
locations. And
yes, location. I don't know why I couldn't think of locations. I think, once again, it is stunning as a film. So creative in also creating a mood of certain things. I would say this is the most beautiful Bond, especially for the Daniel Craig Bond. It's the most beautiful shot film. Absolutely. It's absolutely in a top ranking. I mean, it's hard to maybe compare set to set. There's probably like a preference of like how beautiful certain scenery is, but this is up there. And I think where it stands a little bit above as well is how that scenery plays into, again, what mood, what type of conflict Bond is going under. There is a scene with a bridge. Again, I'm not giving any kind of major spoilers here, but there's a scene with a bridge, and this bridge is outlandish in how it's designed. It's a very European-looking bridge, but it creates such a odd unease that ties into the conflict of what's going on screen. I think, again, there is such a care put into the jet set aspect of a spy film, and it was just nice to see that, wow, what we always reference of a James Bond film having that aspect.
Now, they
brought it home.
Yeah, and did you feel it was, I don't know, was Spectre overkill when it came to, Spectre had the most locations in it out of every film, and they went to many places. They definitely tamed it back a little bit on this one. Not that they were traveling for sure,
right.
But they brought it back. They reeled it in a little bit. So you thought it was tastefully done, basically.
I think so, and definitely wasn't whiplash like. I mean, obviously, a bad comparison, but like a Marvel film would be, where it's wow, we're jumping around everywhere. Or hey, I mean, this is the episode of callbacks. We talked about Kong Skull Island, how it was just like wow, every 5 minutes we're in a new location, and text scrolling across the screen. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Thankfully, no text scrolling across the screen, which was nice. They were at least elegant about it. There's a lot of highlights in that, and there's a lot of highlights in the feel. But where I want to direct some criticism is towards the feel of the action. I think when the spotlight's on Bond, when the spotlight's on Craig's performance, when the spotlight's on the character, on the setting, all great. I think where some of the disconnect happens for me is, once again, how the action is presented for Bond and for friends of Bond. It feels very invincible. It feels like there's a chain link between story beats that, yes, this is a James Bond film. It absolutely has to have these action beats. But specific to gunfights in this film, there's such a breeziness to it that it just... It's not that visually on screen I'm not impressed with what's happening. It's not that it doesn't have a good rhythm and excitement to it. Excitement is almost right in the DNA. It doesn't have weight, though. Never for a moment am I saying is Bond in any sort of danger. And for me, when I watch this film, and actually watching it on a second time just to make sure that I really honed into what I'm feeling with this, it almost felt like these action set pieces were just a beat in action to get us along to the next story dump of where Bond is going with this, his relationships in the story, which thankfully is the best part. Oddly enough, the action, I think, was the weakest element of this. I really just wanted the character development, and that's pretty odd to say with a James Bond film, you know? Usually you want the action set.
Yes and no. To be honest with you, yes and no. It's just coming from it, taking that in, I would say yes and no. It depends. Yeah. It's interesting you found that, yeah.
Yeah, I think when it comes to, maybe it's kind of a no duh that James Bond is obviously going to be the sharpest shot in the whole action sequence.
Right, of course.
That he's going to, come out without a scratch. I think where, once again, it creates a feel of low stakes, especially a distraction of what I want out of the film and what I think most fans of this franchise want out of the film, which I think is pretty important. It touches on the friends of Bond as well, and I think some of the characters are just as bulletproof just as, not superhero-ish, but there's an invincibility to it. It just creates a lack of stakes that, again, the stakes are there in other ways. I felt in the action sequences just kind of fell short for me. That's not to say that Bond is the focus point here. This is a legacy movie that is not only a sequel to the 4 movies preceding this, with Daniel Craig being the focus, but builds on Bond themes in a way that I can probably safely say has never been done before with a James Bond film. I don't think any film has had the type of momentum to show the progression of this character and create vulnerability with it, create emotion both with the audience and in the characters on screen. I think that's a real big hit for that reason. I just think, oddly enough, for a big blockbuster action film, the action is where I was more lukewarm than I wanted to be with it.
Okay.
Bottom line, though, Craig is at his best and deserves the spotlight so well in this film. More than anything, I think with the sequel baggage that comes off of Spectre, maybe as one of the lesser films in Craig's run, it's a little tough for that. But overall is a really wonderful capstone for the Bond franchise and going into it. And once again, I can't stress in no way that any other Bond film could do. For that reason, we are going to go ahead and give No Time to Die a 74.
Okay, 74. I'll deal with that. I can deal with that. We'll 74.
So let's introduce.
I don't know. I was thinking 77. We
have a trend, folks at home, that Tom obviously likes movies independently, and obviously
I see much less than you for sure.
Right.
We saw this film together.
Yes. Not the second time. I did watch the
correct.
Second time.
Saw it in theaters too, which I think is super important for everybody. I don't think this even went to digital release.
No, yeah.
We saw it in the Dolby Cinema, so relatively large screen, not quite IMAX screen,
but great sound.
Great sound, and still a relatively big screen. Okay. This gets.
We have much like we have many games where I call back to ratings, or we have certain trends, or as we said, almost even memes within what we do here. We have a scoring system like my own for Tom.
Okay, so yeah,
we call it the
Tommy Two Shoes score.
The Tommy Two Shoes score is brilliant.
And here's how the rating. So we have a little
much more simple.
Yeah, the
much
podcast.
More elegant.
We'll alert the producers. The podcast is running a little long here, but this is the first Tommy Two Shoes. Yeah, I can't even say it.
You're technically getting 6
score.
reviews.
That's exactly right. Here's the scale of Tommy Two Shoes. You give a movie 0 shoes, 1 shoe, or 2 shoes. That's the scale.
That's it.
If you want to mix it up, which I will, you basically have, those 2 shoes, are the laces tied or untied type of deal. You know what I mean? So it's almost like a out of 5 type of deal.
Amazing.
And I'll surprise you this in the future. Yes. This is how it goes. It's just like, hey, by the way, I have a score for this one.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, I like that.
Okay. I understand there are problems with this film. Problems that I definitely realize, I understand, that I see. That being said, for what this is, first of all, this gets a full-on Tommy Two Shoes score.
Wow, both shoes.
Oh, it gets 2 shoes. We're gonna do one of those shoes. One of the shoes is tied. We're going laces. We're going laces untied on one shoe, though.
Amazing.
It doesn't quite hit that.
Sure.
Both tied 2 shoes. It doesn't quite hit that.
Right.
Because there are problems with it. Here's the thing. One thing we will completely disagree on, the action.
Okay, fair enough.
I personally, folks, love the action. There was a slight change in how they went about doing the action compared to Skyfall, Spectre, and even the first 2. To be honest with you, it's very, very consistent how they treat Bond and what they have them doing. We all understand by now Daniel Craig's the grittiest kind of most get your hands dirty type Bond. The action is different in this. The action feels different. It looks different, and it's more captivating, and it's got a realism, grittiness to it that isn't shaky camera, Bourne.
Oh, true.
They
The
did-
cinematography, the
they did-
look of it.
Correct. They did shaky camera for Quantum of Solace.
Yes,
in a
yes.
couple scenes, and they were really capturing kind of that Bourne quick pace camera right there with the action. The feel of the action was phenomenal in my opinion. It just the feel of it. I loved it. I was smiling at times.
That's good.
There's something about it that I truly love.
Yeah.
What I completely agree with you with is when it came to our extras, when it came to our other cast members, some did a fine job, what they were there to do. Others, yeah, it's like, you know what? Just give me Bond. I don't need
Right.
you here at all, really.
Especially when Bond is the best part. It almost amplifies that type of feeling.
Right,
You know,
right.
you're like, I want the screen back on him.
Right, exactly.
You know?
And Daniel Craig, first of all, opening sequence, loved it. I was as Spectre's opening sequence was phenomenal.
Yes. I'm a big fan
The Day
of
of the
that
Dead
one.
stuff,
Yeah.
very cool. But then with Bond, it was a little bit drawn out. There was more to it, and I was 15 minutes into this film. I was like so happy. I was so happy because I could tell already. I'm so pleased with this. And that pretty much continued. It really did. There's some issues with the protagonist, how that's set up, and everything like that.
Right.
I have issues with the overall. I'm trying to stay away from spoilers, obviously.
Yeah,
I'm doing your job now.
that's the job.
Woo, boy.
That's the job. That's the difference between one lace and two lace tied.
Again, I have, it's some of the story, sure, I have issues with of overall, okay, what are we doing here in this film? What's exactly, you have good guy, bad guy, obviously, and what is the bad guy doing? There's just some issues I have with things.
Sure,
That's fine.
sure.
And then I'm looking at, the more I was thinking about this is, you have to look at, I'm looking at this as Daniel Craig's Bond. It is the most connected movies we ever seen.
Right.
Daniel Craig has made one massive Bond movie, is what he did.
That's a good way of looking at it.
You could go back to back to back to back. Don't even roll the credits. Just keep on going with it. You don't have anything else like that. You know what I mean? And then look at what Daniel Craig is. There's things done in this one that you don't get in any other Bonds. Daniel Craig is not like any other Bond. First of all, Daniel Craig was here to save the franchise. He did exactly that. This is an ode to him. This is an ode to the franchise for the revival and the success of this franchise and the new kind of really worldwide reach that it has, especially getting into other markets, China and everything like that.
Yeah.
It was unbelievable. Especially Skyfall for sure, obviously. Kick that off as far as just
Absolutely.
breaking records and things like that, especially in the Bond franchise. So I'm looking at this and I'm looking at is, okay, who is Daniel, this Daniel Craig Bond? I'm looking at this solely, and I kind of forget about the rest of the Bonds. I look at a Pierce Brosnan who was there, and he was a great 90s Bond, but he was the gadgets guy. He was gimmicky gadgets, and he was he's what capped off the classic, kind of the book Bond, where, classic Soviets, these are the bad guys.
Right.
And we have kind of same storyline back to back to back. We have the gadgets. We have their same kind of even locations and things like that. You have Sean Connery that starts things off, and he sets the tone for Bond of who he is and why you really have this guy, where it's not all that loud and bombastic and gritty and everything like that. But
it's more debonair.
Right. And so looking at Daniel Craig, this movie, although it wasn't a through and through the best Bond to a T film, this was a truly phenomenal Daniel Craig Bond film.
Yeah.
And I agree with you completely. It capped things off beautifully. And I don't even know if I like the way it capped it off because there's so much history with Bond.
Sure.
But if I'm looking at these Daniel Craig films, it was quite wonderful. Even though I'm even on the fence about some things, I understood it. I got it. I enjoyed it immensely. I truly enjoyed it. I cannot tell you how much I enjoyed it, to the point where, as Vin knows, one of my favorite films of all time, if I had my own, if I had my list. If I had
James Bond, that
if
is.
I had my, of all time. If I had my 90s list of all films, we know, even for me, Casino Royale is in there.
Yes.
Not just as a Bond, like my favorite Bond film, and as far as all films considered.
Okay.
Totally top 10, if not top 5. This beats Skyfall. This beats Skyfall for me, at least.
Sure.
Okay,
Maybe not controversial.
but see, Skyfall had that buzz to it,
It did.
like no other. It was.
It got some flack though at the time. People love ragging on that, like it's just Dark Knight.
It's Dark Knight, and it's a funny joke.
Yeah.
But this is right up there. to Casino Royale. And I've kind of told Vin this a little bit. It is not better.
Oh, good.
It is not better. God. Yeah, and for
that's the second shoe unlaced.
Yes, and it wasn't a big question. I always knew, but I just needed to put it to words a little bit better, think about it a little bit more.
I think it's
great. It is up there as far as it is a phenomenal movie of my all times. No, it's not of my all times. When it comes to Bond, absolutely.
Good.
Because I'm okay with separating the Bonds and what we're getting. What was the deal with this Bond? Every actor Bond has a deal with his films. There's the whole feeling behind him. And with Daniel Craig, we get it. We get it to a T, and we cap things off beautifully.
Yeah.
Beautifully. And I personally think you get the most depth from Daniel Craig in this film, which you said you love that depth. You love seeing that character development, that kind of stuff. And again, actually, when it comes to action, I love it. I do, and I'm excited to see it again and a third time. I'm sure I'll see it. I want to get that theater experience and even try the IMAX from the Dolby from whatever.
Absolutely.
Digital, or real 3D. I don't have any interest, but maybe. And I have to say and they give hat tips. They do little kind of Easter egg isn't the right thing,
right?
But
right. Fan service.
They do
maybe.
small odes to Daniel Craig and to the franchise as a whole, which as a fan. It meant so much. There was care and consideration into this where Spectre tried to do and it didn't match. The biggest problem Spectre had, in my opinion, was returning director. Sam Mendes did Skyfall, and they tried to you can't do Lightning in a Bottle twice in a row. And then they tried to keep it, and they went all for it. I like Spectre a lot. The more I watch it, the more I get it, and the more it's just like, all right, okay, I am okay with that.
Sure.
With this, I think they nailed it. I think what they set out to do with Spectre, they did with this, and also they capped it off even better than that.
And bottom line, it's the finale. It's the razzle dazzle. You know, everyone likes the end of the fireworks.
Yes,
show.
and I want to say right now, not perfect.
Right.
If we did spoilers, I could spend 10 minutes tearing apart the film. I could.
Right.
But sitting with it more and really looking at it as the Daniel Craig Bond, and I'm looking at it like that because it really is supposed to be on its own from the get-go. This already had specialty to it. When you start Daniel Craig off and you're doing Casino Royale, which was only done black and white in the 50s in America, which didn't really count. You know what I mean? As far as we're known as the Bond franchise. It was a franchise saver. And they were like, okay, let's do it. We're going to do Casino Royale with this guy. And we're going to we need to save the franchise. Yeah. And they did it in spades. They did it uniquely by doing Casino Royale, and they did it uniquely by capping it off. Yeah. They started they started big with him, went out big with him, and I'm okay with it. Yeah. I get it. And for that reason, I truly, truly love it. Two shoes, not both laces tied. We're keeping one of those shoes untied, though.
I think you did a good job at illustrating why that second shoe is untied as well.
And like I said, if we could get into it more, maybe down the road or something like that, especially privately. Yeah. I have no problem tearing into there's things that need to be ripped apart in this film.
I'm very excited to hear more Tommy Two Shoes. I want to hear a movie that's only one shoe, no ties.
No shoes. How about no shoes?
No shoes.
But anyway, again, from the get-go, I was in love with this film.
Sure.
And the love didn't really stop. I had moments here or there, and I had problems here or there, but overall, the love for this film was almost instantaneous and kept. Where Spectre, I had love for it, and it dropped off. It did. It dropped off into just another kind of movie, and it didn't have it didn't have something special to it. This movie did look beautiful. It was special. Daniel Craig was different in this one, but for all the good reasons.
Absolutely, a progression in a good way.
And people are ragging on the song. Love the song. Love the song. Love the tones and the somberness to it. People hated that it wasn't punchy. I'm all for it. The opening music sequence was phenomenal, and the reason why is there were so many callbacks to old school Bond music openings, I should say. The title sequence, I should say.
Oh, right.
Yeah, music sequence of the opening title.
Oh, you're right. Actually, yeah. Even to some of the
they
imaging,
went back. They went back to 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and even early Daniel Craig kind of looking styles and everything like that, and it was phenomenal. So, yeah, kudos for that. Barbara Broccoli did one hell of a job in procuring this. And again, they started it in a bold way. They ended in a bold way. And I for that reason, love it. I love that.
I love it.
And which makes me kind of okay, even though I disagree and not even sure how I feel about some things, to be honest with you. But
Right.
overall, yeah, package is there.
Lace tied, 2 shoes on. He's out the
two
door. He may
shoes.
trip on one of those
Exactly.
laces.
That is exactly
Oh,
right.
that's good. That's good. Yeah, I think we're getting a really good guideline of what the Tommy Two Shoes score system is.
It's going to be rare, it's only because
Well, you have a lot of passion with this. I think that's
it's
good
the movies I have
yeah,
passion with. There's going to be plenty that
absolutely.
I see that you see as well, but I'll let you do your
Absolutely.
thing. It's
Yeah.
the things that, tickle me in a certain way, I guess.
Well, Tommy, we got anything else before we wrap things
You
up?
know what, man? I think we're good. Is there anything you would like to
No,
add? Are
I'm
we
golden.
going to roll credits?
I love it. I love it.
All right, we have no time to waste here, folks. All right, so let's just do a rundown. We started with The Evil Dead with a 43%, The Evil Dead 2 with a 54%, The Blair Witch Project with an 82%, The Many Saints of Newark with 49%, and No Time to Die. Vin capped that off with a 74%. Listen, folks, we thank you so much for listening. We thank you for producing the show. Again, you can go to the donations tab at thedailyratings.com if you're interested. Or, hey, if you're having fun with us, email us. Keep listening to the podcast. Go to the website if you're interested. We're starting to have a lot of fun with this, so we appreciate it. We'll catch you next week, folks. Thanks for stopping by. Bye. If you enjoyed the podcast, if you would, give us a good rating or tell a friend about us. If you're wondering if a film is worth a watch, or if you'd just like to see more movie ratings from Vince, be sure to stop by thedailyratings.com, where we have our ever-expanding catalog of films. Also, if you found value in the podcast or our site, become a producer and go to the donations tab on thedailyratings.com. You can donate whatever amount of value you feel you received from us. You'll get a producer mention on the next podcast episode, too. We're looking to build this into something large and great, but also be independent from those corporate sponsors. So we greatly appreciate any support from you all. Thanks so much. We'll see you next time on the Daily Ratings Podcast.